Okay.
Okay, we're ready. Hi, my name is Ellen. I'm really here. You can't see me for some reason. Camera decided not to work today, but I'm here. My name is Ellen, like I said, and I'm going to be the moderator for the upcoming debate. So sit back, relax, and we hope you learned something today. Our group was tasked with answering the question, should a free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE, include mandatory ABA services for children and youth with autism spectrum disorder in public schools? So basically, should ABA be required in public schools? We will be discussing the pros and cons of mandatory ABA services in public schools in relation to FAPE as a body of law, and how core ethical principles and BCBA ethical compliance code come into play. Each group member selected a different position in relation to laws and ethics surrounding ABA in the public schools. As I stated before, I, Ellen, will be moderating the debate. Lucinda and Sarah will be presenting an argument from the side of pro-FAPE. Terry will be discussing the issue from the side of con-FAPE. On the side of pro-ethical code, we have the other Sarah presenting. And lastly, Christina will be providing an argument from the con-ethical code side. Our debate will take an informal format. Each side will be presented one at a time with no discussion in between debaters. At the end, we will summarize our debate and declare an overall winner. Before we begin discussing the sides of the debate, I'll go over a quick summary of FAPE, F-A-P-E, Free Appropriate Public Education. FAPE came into law under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and it gives educational rights to children with disabilities to have an access to public education. Previously, this right had already been granted to students of typical development. FAPE also goes on to discuss that education must be modified to best fit the special needs students and make all efforts necessary to serve them. FAPE can guarantee many things, such as a child with special needs being allowed to attend a school out of their neighborhood because their neighborhood school does not have the appropriate services to ensure the least restrictive environment. Something else FAPE can ensure is a child cannot be stopped from enrolling in a public school because district enrollment is too high. All right, we're going to start with Lucinda with the side of pro-FAPE.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm going to start by outlining the topic of why ABA should be mandatory in schools. First off, I'll discuss the importance of ABA. Next, I'll discuss the major court case dealing with ABA and FAPE. Third, I'll discuss the cost of ABA, and finally, I'll go over an example of ABA in schools and a guide for teachers to change to an ABA method of teaching. Ivar Lovaas in the 1980s conducted a study involving 38 children between 30 to 46 months old. 19 children were put into two different groups where the hours of therapy varied. One group received up to 40 hours of ABA and the other group received 10 hours or less. 9 of the 19, or 47%, in the 40-hour-a-week group improved well enough to mainstream. This demonstrates how effective 40 hours of ABA a week can be and why it needs to be conducted in schools. ABA is set up for the individual instead of group instruction. This also helps the person receiving therapy gain skills at a quicker pace. It has been a struggle for some parents to obtain ABA for their children, which has led to many court cases. Yale and Driscoll in 2000 wrote an article explaining the court cases that have been brought to the Supreme Court due to issues with IDEA and FAPE. IDEA and FAPE have used kind of vague language to set up what they feel is best for the children. And one of the first court cases dealing with ABA in schools was the Board of Education of the Hendrick Hudson Central School District versus Raleigh in 1982, herefore just referred to as Raleigh. In this case, the court ruled that FAPE was the right of all students in special education. It was more than just access to a public school program. It also states that the individual should benefit from instruction. While the majority of children may benefit from some group instruction, ABA with one-on-one teaching is better for the child. Included with the Raleigh case comes with the large cost of ABA. ABA can cost anywhere from $12,000 to $70,000 per year. This is a large cost that most people have trouble obtaining. In Texas, Chase and Harris and Neely in 2000 collected data on how much ABA services compare to the special education costs children receive in school. Each child in the school receives a budget of $11,000 per year. The authors state that the Early Intensive Behavioral Intervention, or EIBI, costs around $22,500 per year over a 3-year span. In the end, this is a savings of $208,500 with the EIBI versus the 18 years of no behavioral plan and care needed. So here's the formula that shows how he got his numbers. And then moving on to some examples of schools that have already began to use ABA. Foreign in 2015 discussed a special needs school in the UK that has a staff of a BCBAD, ABCBA, and ABCABA. They have had significant success with children under the age of 7 by having the staff provide 40 hours of therapy a week. The therapists collaborate with the teachers who help implement the programs. The BCBAs conduct functional assessments and make sure that teachers are providing the service with the procedural integrity. The article states that there was a large upfront cost, but they were prepared to make the changes for the students. ABA should be mandatory in schools, not just because it is effective, but many behavioral practices are already being used in schools. Some schools use the school-wide positive behavioral support plan, which details reinforcing good behavior. This plan is written for the entire school, and it is individualized for some when they need more assistance. Other schools may use token economies, good behavior games, and other forms of positive reinforcement. Also, once introduced to ABA methods, many teachers prefer to use ABA guidelines versus developmental or psychological guidelines, according to Skinner and Hales in 1992. To finish up, more and more schools are switching to ABA methodology of teaching. Jacobson in 2000 wrote an article to assist and explain on how to change a school over from a teaching-based to ABA-based teaching methods. It discusses the costs and changes that will need to be made. Some of these reasons are hire extra staff who are able to implement ABA, reorganize the classroom and instructional routines, meaning smaller group sizes, and extending the school hours in year for in-service teaching. Jacobson advises that the change would be done gradually and not rapidly to help save on the cost of ABA. And now I will let Sarah talk.
I'm going to be talking about IDEA and FAPE. In 1975, the U.S. government established the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, that students with disabilities were entitled to free and appropriate public education, known as FAPE, in public schools. While this is the backbone for IDEA today, there have been crucial amendments through the years to increase quality and access of education. In the 1980s, the concern for children with disabilities as well as their families was brought to the limelight. Amendments were made. The service age changed from 3 years old to 21 years old to birth to 21 years old. Then transition was added. This focused on transition from high school to post-secondary living, and IEPs were required. The IEP is the Individualized Education Act, or Individualized Education Plan, excuse me, that included transition plans, appropriate instruction for learning, employment-related service goals, adult living benchmarks, and linking the student to available community resources. IEPs are legal documents for teachers, parents, school administration, related service providers, and students to collaborate to improve educational outcomes for students. Let's jump back for a second. FAPE is a mandate under IDEA. Just to reiterate, according to the Department of Education, the purpose of IDEA is to ensure that all children with disabilities have access to free and appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. To ensure that FAPE is being met for a student, reflect on the IEP and ask yourself, Is the IEP unique to my child's needs? And will the goals and related services prepare my son or daughter for post-secondary living? The answers to these questions will help you determine if FAPE is being met or not. If the public education option is not available, one always must be provided. Now to the reimbursement. The reimbursement scenario is a case-by-case basis. According to the Spectrum of Hope, ABA costs can range anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 a year. It is very costly service, and when delivered in a high-intensity, individualized environment, it can be very helpful to assisting clients with autism develop daily functioning skills, hygiene, academic language, and increasing positive and appropriate behavioral skills. Due to the cost, school systems are not quick to pay for ABA services, even if the student requires it to be successful. A typical process to obtain assistance through the school can be a lengthy one. The steps required include obtaining an educational diagnosis of IEP, followed by an IEP meeting. All members must be present, the related service provider, an administrator, special education teacher, a general education teacher, the parents or guardians, and the student. Parents can request ABA services at this time. If the school agrees to pay, the case is over and the parents and school work out a plan together. If the school says no, the parents must reject the IEP. At the time of the IEP rejection, then parents often retain a lawyer or an advocate to help fight the cause. At the next IEP meeting, the school might have to file for due process. The team meets again and attempts to find a resolution. If a resolution is found, a settlement is discussed. If no resolution is found, the case goes into a hearing where a judge will make a decision. Other payment options include insurance. Many insurance companies will turn down ABA services due to the cost. However, if appealed, many will cover it, at least a partial payment on a case-by-case basis, or self-funded. Some families can afford to and will privately pay for ABA services for their child as they recognize the benefits to therapy. An example of a reimbursement case is Deal versus Hamilton County and the Board of Education. Zach Deal's parents provided full ABA services to him outside the public school setting. When Zach's parents requested the school offer ABA services, the school system denied the services. This ended in a court battle, and it was found that the denial of the ABA services was a violation of FAPE, and as the school was unable to provide and ended up reimbursing the parents. Now we'll move on to
next.
Ellen.
We have Terry. She'll be discussing the con side for ABA in relation to FAPE.
Okay. IDEA requires that a child receive a free and appropriate education, as we've talked about FAPE. It also specifies that there must be some educational benefit to a child receiving services under an IEP. As of now, IDEA does not specify what is considered quote-unquote appropriate or to what level of benefit must be shown. Different courts have interpreted the language of IDEA as follows. The Board of Education versus Rowley from 1982 has played an important role in the case law of the last 30 plus years. It states that FAPE does not guarantee best treatment or even progress, just that students are given a quote-unquote basic floor of opportunity that has some academic benefit. The decisions made in Rowley have been upheld by numerous other more current cases, including KS, XREL PS versus Fremont Unified School District in 2008, Joshua A. by Jorge A. versus Rockland Unified School District 2009, and Hensley versus Colville School District, Washington Court of Appeals in 2009. Additionally, Barnett versus Fairfax County School Board from 1991 found that the law does not require the most sophisticated methods without consideration of fiscal or geographic concerns. Quote, Congress intended the states to balance the competing interests of economic necessity on the one hand and the special needs of a handicapped child on the other hand when making education placement decisions. This decision was upheld by Dong versus the Board of Education of Rochester County School in 1991. Dong versus the Board of Education of the Rochester County School also found that a program such as TEACH, T-E-A-A-C-H, is more consistent with IDEA's goal of least restrictive environment, or LRE. LRE means that the child is educated in the least restrictive environment, and it was argued in that case that the one-to-one intervention on a daily basis could be considered a violation of LRE. In fact, the district was able to prove in that case that the child's social skills declined while using ABA since the intervention is primarily one-to-one based. Research also supports this idea. A 2009 study by Panare et al. Showed the efficacy of the TEACH program in an inclusive education setting. Data from the Department of Ed, let me pull it up there for you real quick. And this is from the most current data from the 2013 school year. And this is the percent of time it's spent in a general education classroom for children with autism. And looking at the less than 40%, which is that blue, the lighter blue, and then the orange, which is 40 to 79%. So that combined, most children, about 60% of children diagnosed with autism, served under IDEA or in the regular education classroom between 40 to 80% of their day, in keeping with the mandate of least restrictive environment. A 1988 decision in the Lockman versus Illinois State Board of Ed stated that parents do not have the right to compel a district to provide a specific program or teaching methodology. Additionally, this idea was outlined in 2006 when the Office of Special Education, in a review of IDEA, stated that a district is not required to provide the methodology with the greatest body of peer-reviewed research in order to provide FAPE. In the same review, the Office of Special Education stated that there is no requirement that an IEP includes specific instructional methodologies. The most recent data from the Department of Education for the 2013 school year show that 538,000 children are being served in the public education system with an IEP that have the diagnosis of autism. To mandate that each of these children be taught using only ABA methods is unrealistic. Mandating ABA would take the decision for what is best for the student out of the hands of the local educational authority and parents. The fight then becomes about another treatment that the parent or school feels is better suited to meet the student's needs. Additionally, no other program or teaching methodology is mandated under IDEA. In order for ABA to be mandated under federal law, the law would need to change dramatically. Interestingly, the Supreme Court is set to look at just this issue. Andrew F. versus Douglas County School District is a suit brought by parents in Colorado. They believe that their child was denied FAPE by the local school district. They have appealed to the Supreme Court after losing in lower courts, noting that there are different standards across the country about what is considered quote-unquote some educational benefit. A favorable decision by the Supreme Court may indeed force changes to the wording of IDEA. Even then, I would continue to argue that no particular teaching methodology should be mandated by IDEA, but that ABA should be one option for parents that choose it.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to Sarah with an H. She's going to discuss FAPE with ethics on the pro side.
Thank you, Ellen. Like she said, I'll be talking about the pro ethics in FAPE. So the basic core ethical principles can help guide and support the argument for the inclusion of ABA services under FAPE. The first being do no harm. It may be harmful or at least less beneficial to provide treatments that have not been scientifically validated to be effective. ABA has been scientifically validated, thus lowering the chance that providing the service will do no harm. Another supporting core ethical principle is respect autonomy. Multiple studies have shown the effectiveness of ABA techniques to teach skills that increase independence and FAPE supports, thus increasing the likelihood that the client's ultimate autonomy will be respected. The principle benefiting others also justifies the use of ABA under FAPE. Under this principle, students with ASD should be serviced with treatments that benefit them, not those that benefit the school staff, like those that are implemented because it is easier for the teacher or cheaper to provide. ABA has been empirically proven to benefit individuals with autism in various realms of life, like increasing social, academic, and self-help skills, and reducing problem behaviors. In this way, ABA clearly can benefit the learner directly and should be available as treatment provided by public schools. Being just further supports ABA coverage under FAPE. This principle may be best explained with a rhetorical question. If it were you or your child, wouldn't you want and believe the most appropriate and research-based therapy would be available for you and your child under public education? It just seems more fair that students have access to effective treatments like ABA, if necessary and appropriate for their IEP. We can also consider the principle according dignity. As mentioned, ABA can be used to increase independence, like by increasing communication, in therapy recipients. This allows them to eventually make more of their own decisions and participate more fully in their own lives, giving them the dignity that all people deserve. Finally, the ethical principle pursuit of excellence supports coverage of ABA under FAPE. ABA is one of the only supported treatments for autism, and in this way, it is one of the most excellent treatments individuals with autism can receive. It should thus be the one offered by public schools if they are in accordance with this ethical principle. Next, although it applies only universally to licensed behavior analysts, the BACB Professional and Ethical Compliance Code can also seems to highlight ethical standards that promote ABA services being provided under FAPE. For example, we can consider that knowledge based on empirical services, such as the principles behind ABA, are what should be used to provide and guide services. See Code Point 1.01, reliance on scientific knowledge. Further, it is only if multiple empirically supported treatments are in contention that other factors like cost of treatment be considered, per Code 2.09, treatment/intervention efficacy. In this way, ABA in public schools cannot be ruled out because it is, quote, too expensive. We can also consider the fact that teachers may not be trained to work with students with autism in violation of Point 1.02, boundaries of competence. Teachers should not ethically be working with students with autism if they have no training or education in autism or the appropriate schools for these students. Behavior and educated in ASD and ABA techniques may therefore be better qualified to instruct these students with autism and definitely better qualified to implement ABA. See Point 1.05, professional and scientific relationships. ABA service coverage under FAPE is also supported by points 1.04, integrity, and 2.05, rights and prerogatives of clients. Clients, in this case students, certainly have the ethical right to receive quality treatments. They have the right to a free and appropriate public education that provides, quote, meaningful benefit, unquote, to an individual student. If a student can only benefit meaningfully through ABA services, they legally and ethically must be provided. Finally, we can consider point 2.04, third-party involvement in services. This clause states that the ultimate recipient of services and his or her care should be the utmost priority to the service providers, in this case, the public school. School's ethical responsibility is to the individual student and his or her needs, which may require the administration of ABA therapy. The school's priorities and policies should not ethically come between the student and what he or she needs, because he or she comes first. Last but not least, in this pro-ethical discussion of ABA and FAPE, we can consider the least restrictive environment. This ethical standard asserts that students with disabilities have the right to be educated in the least restrictive environment and in such a way that they can continue to participate in the least restrictive environment. A treatment like ABA, which can teach independence and self-help skills that ultimately increase the number of environments the student can learn in, should thus be promoted and provided by all educators. And those are some points that support the coverage of ABA under FAPE.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Our last slide we're going to discuss will come from Christina, and she's going to be discussing ethics and FAPE from the con point of view.
Thank you, Ellen. Like Sarah said, the core ethical principles, along with the BACB Professional Ethical Compliance Codes, can help support the argument why FAPE should not include mandatory ABA services. ABA is a one-on-one therapy approach that requires a lot of time and money to implement. A licensed BCBA is also required. However, many school districts do not employ trained behavior analysts despite having behavior goals and plans for the child. This is because they do not have the resources to hire licensed BCBAs, so they hire professionals that are not board certified. In addition, school districts may only have the resources to be able to hire one BCBA, making caseloads large. By making school districts provide mandatory ABA through FAPE, school districts are intentionally having BCBAs violate core ethical principles. The main core ethical principle violated is do no harm. When the school districts are faced with providing mandatory ABA services, the use of non-licensed BCBAs or having just one BCBA on staff is causing more harm than benefit to their students. Treatments will be provided outside of one's training/area of expertise. Data collection systems might miss the significance of a behavior causing serious harm. Another core ethical principle violated is accepting accountability. Large caseloads prevent the BCBA from making sure everything they have done is performed at the highest standard and that the treatment is proper and justified. The time it takes to research the problem behavior is not adequately being done, making the BCBA take responsibility for their failures along with corrections to the plan difficult and delayed. Although these core ethical principles apply only to licensed behavior analysis, the BACB Professional and Ethical Compliance Code also is violated when FAPE requires ABA services to be provided in schools. The responsibility of BCBAs is to stay within their boundaries of competence. 1.02. When in a school district, BCBAs have no say-so on who will be on their caseloads. They will receive children with behaviors that are outside of their training/area of expertise and still be required to come up with a plan, thus potentially increasing the risk of causing harm to the child, which goes hand in hand with violating our core principle of do no harm. Another responsibility is integrity, 1.04 A and C. BCBAs must refrain from making professional commitments that can be kept and falls in line with 102. Since BCBAs do not have a say-so on how many kids they can take on their caseload, there's no limit on how many kids they can have. Also, school districts at most only have one BCBA on staff, making following through with obligations along with providing a truthful and honest environment difficult. BCBAs have a responsibility to operate in the best interests of their clients, whereas in schools, the best interests of the child is not always the focus. Consequently, violating 2.01, accepting clients. Again, there's no say-so who walks in the door needing services in the school district. There are large caseloads, lack of licensed BCBAs, or even limited training in areas of expertise for BCBAs in schools that prevent the child from receiving the best available treatment for their behavior. Generalization of the behavior is typically used since school districts do not have the resources for the necessary consultations. This issue leads to another violation, 2.03, consultations. There is very little sway or say in school districts for BCBAs when it comes to advocating for further consultations or referrals. Many school districts do not have the resources or staff to appropriately serve these requests. Also, school laws prevent BCBAs from suggesting certain types of referrals for treatment, such as medication. And lastly, when employed by the school, many issues can arise from recommendations that teachers or parents make that aren't consistent with our codes, like 2.04D, third-party involvement in services. In this situation, the BCBA is highly unlikely to be able to solve the conflicts with parents or teachers, making terminating the services or transitioning the child to another BCBA impossible. This again is due to the high caseloads, lack of licensed BCBAs on staff, and the resources that the school has.
Okay, thank you, Christina. That was our last debater for each side. So next we're going to go into our questions from the professor. Our first question will be fielded by Sarah, without an H. The question reads, what are the ethical concerns related to various credentials of professionals implementing ABA in schools?
So we have 3 points related to this question. The first one was all professionals implementing ABA need to have a certain level of training. Is this per the BCBA ethical standards? Is this going to be through the school district? Perhaps each school implementing ABA needs to have a set number of BCBAs at each school, BCABAs, and RBTs. The next point is, should all be required to become at least a RBT, a registered behavior technician? Many schools require that the paraprofessionals become certified nursing assistants or CNAs. Why can't they additionally become RBTs? How is one licensure trump another? And then the last point was the need to guarantee ongoing training through the BCBA ethical standards. This is an easy fix. Staff who work with students with or who require restraint and blocking strategies have to have a certification for crisis prevention, CPI, handled with care. Again, how does that licensure requirement trump an RBT requirement or a BCBA requirement? The school districts are in charge of knowing when it's time to re-up the certification. Why can't they be responsible for the RBT licensure as well?
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Our next question will be answered by Terry. The question reads, do you think the severity of the disability should impact the use of ABA in schools?
Our discussion on this primarily centered around the fact that it wouldn't change much that already isn't standard in the school system when you're talking about services needed for an IEP. Assessments are done, and the services that are found to be appropriate are put into place. So the more severe the case, probably more could be said towards including ABA as part of the services that are rendered by the school district.
Okay, thank you. I will answer our last question, which reads, do you have any personal experiences related to this topic you would like to share? As a matter of fact, I currently work for a public school district who offers an ABA program. We work with students specifically on the autism spectrum, offering push-in services into the classroom, pull-outs one-on-one, group services, play groups, social groups, that sort of thing. And we strictly use ABA methods. We're supervised by BCABAs and BCBAs. And it's actually been quite a great work experience for myself. I've really enjoyed being able to work in the public school system, but also use all the ABA methods that I learned in home system. And it seems to be a very well-received program by the district and by parents, as we have a very high enrollment. There's always more referrals and that sort of thing. So as we'll discuss shortly in our wrap-up, it may not be the only solution, but I'm very glad that I can provide that to various students. We're going to do our wrap-up next, and then it'll be done. So as a reminder, the question at hand was, should a free and appropriate public education include mandatory ABA services for children and youth with autism spectrum disorder in public schools? So we decided, after completing hours of research and discussing the topic numerous times, we have decided collectively that FAPE should not include mandatory ABA services for students. We came to this conclusion because as future BCBAs, we do believe that ABA is the best treatment available for our clients, but we could not ethically, morally, or legally state that the choice of treatment should be taken from the client or their guardians. So in short, ABA should be a choice always, but should never be the only choice. Thank you for watching.